Welcome everyone. This is our session on public relations campaigns. In our last sessions, we dealt with what public relations is, what is its objectives, what are its functions, how is it related to corporate communications, and how do we make an effective piece of corporate communication. In this session, we thought we'll bring across to you some bit of practical aspects as to what gets into designing a public relation campaigns, what is the kind of public relation environment that you look at, and of course the second session would deal with the case studies of public relations. So let us begin. In this session, we will talk about understanding the brand, we will talk about knowing the target audience, we will talk about creating implementable plans. Every plan is not necessarily well implemented. So we are talking about creating implementable plans. Then we are talking about knowing your means, what is the mean and what is the end that we are trying to reach. Then we are talking about how do we tackle results and how do we track it. Then we are also talking about the evaluation based decisions which will help us in designing the future campaigns and pieces of communication. So we begin with understanding the brand. When we talk about what a brand is, we know that a brand is an identity of a product. It is also an umbrella which has a number of products under it. Now, a brand reflection is highly important because when you need to understand the identity of your brand, when you need to understand what your brand stands for, how it is perceived by the audience, it is also important to understand and reflect back on how your brand looks. So you have to think about the current face of the organization and what it is being put out to the public as. So the current face of an organization might be viewed as an organization which is socially responsible. It can be viewed as an organization that is aggressive. It can be viewed as an organization which has made a mark internationally, or an organization which is totally Indian in character and in values and even its products and services. So we have to look at the current face of the organization. If you imagine your organization to be a person, you have to assume and figure out what this person looks like. Also, when we talk about understanding the brand, we talk about, a thorough brand reflection in order to evaluate the critical topics that will affect your interactions with the public. So the brand reflection that you're doing, the identification of this personality of the brand that you're doing needs to be very thorough and should be able to come out with some critical points that will affect your interactions with the public. Say for example, if a brand is viewed as made for an upwardly mobile class of people and is viewed as a modern kind of a brand, you should be able to attend to the public interactions in a similar manner. So you cannot be attending to it in a traditional manner, or you cannot be talking to traditional groups of people because you will not be able to connect well with them. Then there are some basic questions that must be answered when we're talking about understanding the brand as such. Like, what does the company do? What is its vision and mission? When we say vision and mission, for a lot of people it may not appear very important. But on the long term, it is highly important because that is the reflection of your personality. Like when we attend an interview, a person is not only what he looks. It is basically the skills, the qualification, the performance in the past, and the kind of organizations or companies or projects that he or she has worked with, which counts more. But at the end of it, the final touch comes through your personality. What kind of a person are you? How do you think? How do you react or respond to situations are all very important. So similarly, the vision and mission of a company is very important. Then of course the next question that you have to answer in order to ascertain the kind of image that your brand has in the eyes of the audience is the USP of your brand. What sets your brand apart from the competition, from all the other similar brands that are there in the market and which are there to confuse the consumers when they make their choices? So what is that unique thing, what is the unique selling proposition that your brand enjoys which is missing in all the rest of the competition? The third aspect is, what should the audiences think of when they are thinking of your brand? Like I just gave you an example. When I look at a certain media brand, do I see it as a modern and upcoming kind of a brand? Do I see a certain kind of value which is more associated with the youth? Or do I see it as a traditional thing to fall back on in times of need? Do I look at it as something which will always be handy? Do I look at it as something which is more of a luxury? What is the perception that I have about that brand? And of course, the product which is related to it. So, besides answering those questions, what else is involved in understanding your brand? The core values, the brand voice, the USP. Like when I say about the core values, what are those basic values that a particular company would stand for? Like say for example, Mahindra and Mahindra stands more for toughness, stands more for nationality, so also for Tata. So what are those core values that are inbuilt in them which make them appear in a certain light? And what is the kind of brand voice they have? What is it? What is the concern with which they are automatically associated? While we progress through this session, I will explain more about the brand voice. Then through this understanding of the brand, one knows what is to be highlighted in a campaign. Why are we trying to know the brand so well? Because we need to figure out, we need to understand what are those things that have to be highlighted in a certain piece of communication. Say for example, this public relations campaign. What is it that we need to highlight? What is it that we need to publicize? Where is it that we want our audiences to focus and get influenced and then make the correct decisions? So this all can be done only when you know your own brand very well. Don't just know your USP, also know how you compare to your competitors. We know there are lots of competition in the market. There are many brands which look similar to your brand. So you don't just have to know how your product stands apart. You also have to know how well it compares with another product, because every consumer invariably, whenever is out in the market to make a purchase decision, will compare products of similar kind, of similar nature, of similar features and of similar money. So, and also what are the values that are associated with it. So if you own a certain brand of a car, say X, there are certain values that come with it. Like a certain car may stand for sturdiness, safety, security. Another may stand for mileage. Another yet may stand for a middle class segment car. Yet another may be a luxury car. So it is the value which is associated with that car with which they will compare the other products to. Then you learn about common practices and trends and how others tackle similar situation. What are those common practices? What are those trends? And how are people tackling them in similar situations? That is also very important to understand, because market environment, irrespective of how many players are there in the market environment stays the same. And it poses the same number of challenges to you as it is posing to the other brands. So in such kind of times, you need to understand, say for example, in times of a pandemic, how are brands responding to the sales calls? How are the brands responding to building a brand identity? How are they showing themselves to be socially responsible to people? So ideally, all those common practices and trends you have to tackle with, which have similar situations, which are in same marketing environment and yet posing a competition. Then this will also be helpful when you want to improve, because you can see a certain brand X as compared to you has, smartly marketed itself in a certain manner. Probably you can pull out a few things from there. Probably you can re-innovate what you have done. Probably you can see where other products or other brands have failed, and you make sure that you don't repeat those mistakes. So this will help you know about the brand more. And then of course, take an inventory of your brand's assets. In my previous lectures, I have spoken about SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. It is a formula that was given long back but is yet relevant. So ideally you have to take a feel of what your brand's assets are, what your brand's strengths are, what are those automatic things that come to you because of being the kind of brand that you are. So The inventory of your brand's assets is very important. Now we come to the next thing of planning a PR campaign, which is knowing your target audience. Often on and off I've been emphasizing why it is important to understand who your target audience is, to segment them wisely, and to ensure that they become the participants of your communication campaign, so that your communication meets with success. So target audience are very vital to any campaign's success. Now, are you targeting the general audience, or are you targeting a certain segment? When I say segmentation of the audiences, I basically can mean you could be looking only at the youth, or you could be looking at the elderly, you could be looking at children, you could be looking at women. All of these are separate segments. So are you addressing the audiences in general, or are you trying to create a certain segment and then talk to that segment of the population? None of the two strategies are wrong. At certain points of time, and you will see when I discuss the cases of public relations with you, that there can be certain times when it is important to address all the audiences together in general. Okay? And as compared to this, there can be times when you're aiming at a certain product and the sale of it, or increasing the business volume of it, you will be, it will be better to target a certain segment. So both the approaches are fine, but you should know what exactly is your objective of the PR campaign, and whether targeting the audiences in general would meet it, or targeting a certain segment would meet it. The third is the geographical narrowing down. Geographical narrowing down is important because then you can focus on that kind of a population in a certain manner. Say for example, if we talk about targeting the service class people. Service class people have different characteristics and different psychometrics when it comes to metropolitan towns and cities. And they will be very different if you talk of SEC, socio-economic classification, SEC B or C class towns and cities. Salaried people are there in all sorts of towns. But nevertheless, the kind of characteristics they will show, the kind of purchase decisions they will make, the kind of media behavior they will display, or the kind of media habits they will have, will be different from one geographical area and one kind of demography to another. So ideally, that geographical narrowing down is important. Why? Because it will give you a greater control on your communication campaign. It will give you a greater hold. It will also give you better opportunities of midterm corrections. Midterm corrections are important in all sorts of campaigns, be they advertising campaigns, be they public relations campaigns, branding campaigns, anything. Because often whenever we're planning a campaign, it is for a certain period of time. It could maybe last for a few weeks or a few months. In ideal situation, we have to keep looking, keep checking, keep measuring whether the campaign is going in the right direction or not, and if there is a scope of introducing any midterm corrections, they must be introduced, so that we can optimize upon the resources that we are using, so that we can obtain better results as our outputs. So those things become important. Hence, geographical narrowing down will be important, because then you will be able to carry on this campaign with greater control. Of course, what you can do is, after the metropolitan towns and cities, or say after the villages, you can go to another segment of the demography or the geography. So that ways you narrow down, and then you focus on one certain segment first and then switch on to the other. Then when we talk about knowing your target audience, another thing which is important is, and which is related to geographical narrowing down, is understanding the norms, culture and people. So say for example, you talking to the metropolitan youth, their culture and their value system is much different from a youth who is in the villages. And we understand that we in India are a very volatile kind of a society. We believe in the different things, and there are different norms, social norms that we follow, so on and so forth. So if your communication has to succeed, obviously the receiver of your communication should like what you're saying. And in order that person should like, the audience should like your communication, you should know what are the norms, what are the culture, and what kind of people you are going to play around with. So the norms and cultural mores become more important, because then they are able to identify with the communication. So your communication should identify with their norms and cultures so that they will get attracted and they will get, they will accept the communication that you're making. Something which is in stark contrast with what they believe, with what their value system is, will fall flat, will yield no results. So understanding norms and culture and people is important. Then this will help in personalizing messages to resonate with the audiences more appropriately. This is what I just explained. If you have to identify better with your audiences, if you want that your message should resonate well with the audiences, it is important that you understand them in totality, which means the kind of family values they have, the kind of life values and life skills they have, the kind of norms, cultures, the values that they believe in, the beliefs, all those things become important. Get a realistic estimate of time, energy and other resources that you have at hand, because the kind of resources that you will be able to spend in a certain geographical area would be different when you're talking of, say, a small town or city as compared to a metropolitan town or city. So get a realistic estimate so that the communication at any point of time does not have to be aborted or does not fall flat. So that is very important. Learn about their interests. Learn about the interests of the people that you're going to talk to. If I'm interested in poetry and you're going to talk space science to me, probably I'll never get your message. So ideally you need to know what my interest is. Then also learn about the content that they will find engaging. What is the kind of content they like to talk about? Is it like that they sit together in groups and they discuss about politics? Is it that they usually are very busy people and the neighbors don't know each other? What kind of a society is it, and what kind of content interests them? All of this needs to be discovered if you have to engage them in the right kind of content so that it leaves a mark on your targeted segment of the audience. Then of course, this way of communicating or approaching communication is a more inexpensive way. At the same time, it is also a very effective way to market your business. Now let us look at the third thing. What are the questions you should be asking if you want to know about your target audience? Like we just discussed in the previous segment, let us also discuss it here. Who is your target segment? When I say who is your target segment, I would want to know what is the age group, the gender, the occupation, the education, those basic demographics. Then where can the target audience be reached? If I am talking about metropolitan towns and cities, probably social media is where they can be reached. If I'm talking about farmers, probably it's radio worker who has to be addressed. So who is the target audience that I'm trying to reach? Is the target audience tech savvy or copy savvy? To exemplify simply, would they like to read physical forms of newspaper, or are they comfortable with newspapers on their mobiles? So ideally, how tech savvy are they? If you keep communicating through technology and they are not that tech savvy, say for example, we talk about the elderly generation who do not keep in touch so much with the latest technology, your communication may not reap any results. So it tells about the content also, whether the tech savviness and where you can reach them and who is your target audience. These are the questions which will not only tell you about the kind of content that you should offer to your target audience, but they will also tell you about the platform for engagement. So that platform for engagement can be Facebook, that platform for engagement can be general discussion between people. So if you want to highlight that during the times of a pandemic like the new coronavirus, you must practice hand hygiene. In villages, it has to be village level officers and block development officers and the health workers who should be talking to the people in general, and why this is spreading, the reasons for spread and what you can do to prevent it, etc. But if it is the youth who you're trying to reach, probably social media is the best platform. Make a small video and circulate, that's best. If they are more into reading, your target audience reads a lot online, then blogs and online platforms are best for them. So you have to figure out which kind of content is better. You have to figure out which kind of platform works best and for which kind of a target audience. Then what are the trends that are popular amongst the target audience? If we're talking about housewives, do they like online shopping? If we're talking about say for example professionals, do they find time to shop at all, or is the trend of shopping for say for example clothes going out of choice? Are they only shopping for technology related stuff? What is it? What are their purchase behaviors like? And what is the kind of trend that is more popular amongst the target audience? Because the trends will decide what kind of content they are engaging with, what kind of likelihood is there for them to accept or reject your communication. Then the third step is creating implementable plans. Good plans have inbuilt flexibility in them. So a good plan is when you are in a position and the situation arises, the demand is such that you should be introducing some kind of a change, you should be able to do it. So you determine a timeline and create some SMART goals for implementable plans. When I say SMART, what is SMART? S stands for specific. It is important to know what is that specific goal that you're trying to meet. Now the specific goal could be a change in the way people view you, so a change in brand personality. It could be reputation management, so you want to check on your reputation and how people view you as compared to your competition, because that is one way how you can stand apart from your competition. Then what else can be a specific goal? It could be rise of sales volume, rise of business volume, making greater more number of partners. It could be attracting investment in your company. So all of them are specific goals. When I say measurable, S-M-A-R-T, M stands for measurable. Measurable means any piece of communication. See, communication basically is abstract. It is more or less an intangible thing. You come across a beautiful piece of poem, you read it, you enjoy it, and then you forget about it. There is nothing to take home until, of course, it is the mind and the thought that you have with you. But when I say measurable, there should be some measurable output, because I'm investing into this piece of communication, investing in terms of all my resources, in terms of my time, in terms of money, energy, my manpower, all of it together. So my results must be measurable. If they're not measurable, I will not be able to, create an impact. I will not be able to say with force that this is what we have created through this communication, and the next step based on this should be something else. So it is important that the plans be measurable. Then the third is achievable. A lot of time plans are beautiful and they look beautiful at the face of it. They look very exciting and it looks like they will achieve the results, but they are not achievable. So one must be, one must do the checks and balances very properly. One must be very well and thorough with their homework, the background work. So that is the way you will be able to figure out whether this plan will succeed, whether it will achieve the desired results or it will miss upon it. So achievability of plans is very, very important and very relevant. SMAR, R stands for realistic or relevant. So how realistic your plans are, how relevant your plans are will decide whether they are going to make their impact or not. When I say relevant, what I mean is whether they are befitting the scenario of today, whether they will be able to meet the expectations in the given scheme of things, and whether they will be able to achieve the desired results. So they have to be very, very realistic and they have to be very relevant. See, when I say realistic, it doesn't mean that they have to be 100% successful. A good piece of communication is, for the majority, it is successful. It is largely successful. No communication can be 100% successful, and there also must always be scope for future improvements. So it has to be very realistic, and at the same time it should be relevant to the brand, to the product and the target audience who is going to invest their time, if nothing else, exposing themselves to it. And T stands for timely. So everything cannot be working well at all times. So you have to be very choosy about the time when you're approaching. Say for example, if you're talking about the sale of a certain product, the person who you're talking to must be in a mindset, in the frame of mind, in a thought pattern where that person should be able to listen to you with an open mind and then accept or reject your communication. So ideally it should be the communication that you're making should be very timely. So timeliness is important as far as implementable plans are created. So, and hence, because the SMART goals have to be kept in mind, that is the reason why we must have certain levels of flexibility in our plans. Now, let us look at the means. The means are the resources. The means are the methods through which we will reach our end. Take stock of your resources, make a realistic estimate. What do you have, for how long do you have it, and what kind of results should you expect from it. Then you should have a multi-pronged approach to reach the target audience. When I say a multi-pronged approach, what I essentially mean is you cannot serve the same kind of tea to all the audiences all the time. You have to change. So different kind of communications will work with different kind of audiences. Say for example, if I am talking about women, there would be a different approach of looking at things, of looking at their concerns, their issues, and then how your brand or your product can be handy in looking after those concerns. Similarly, if you're talking to a certain age group of boys, say teenager boys, it has to be totally different, because they would like to talk about and they will be influenced by different kind of stuff as compared to the elderlies, as compared to parents of little children, so on and so forth. So your communication essentially must have a multi-pronged approach, and it has to reach various target segments. Then the engagement with audiences on different networks is different. When I say this, what I mean is you should essentially customize. Like I just said, when you're talking to teenager boys, their concerns are different, their engagements are different. So the kind of content they will come across in the form of, when I say content, it could be text, it could be audios, it could be videos, it could be anything. So anything that they're interacting with, anything that they're engaging with will be different for a certain segment of audience as compared to the others. So because they're also using different networks. So if the elderlies believe more in reading newspapers, and if you want to reach them with your product or your service or anything of your concern, then probably it is a different kind of network that you should be interacting with, that you should be engaging, as compared to talking to the youngsters, as compared to talking to housewives, as compared to talking to owners of businesses. So ideally there can be different kinds of segments that can be made, and based on your means you have to divide how you can customize for everybody accordingly, because this is very important. If you have to optimize the use of your resources and see to it that you get maximum value for the resources that you're using. The next is content variety and diversity. When I was talking about customization of your content and engagement and different platforms and networks, what I essentially meant was a variety and a diversity of content. This diversity of content will lead to greater ROI, the return on investment. Now, return on investment will be greater if there is a greater content variety. Why? Because here is a piece of communication that everybody will find interesting to engage with. The more diverse it is, the more customized it is, the better the return on my investment, because then I have seen to it that every segment of the target audience is getting addressed individually, differently, effectively. So customize for each platform and target segment. So customization does not only have to be done keeping in mind the target segment, the target audience. It also has to be different when you're talking about a certain kind of platform. Say for example, if you're trying to convey your message by means of a video, the number of words to be used, or through a picture, a photograph, visuals, series of visuals. In all these cases, the number of words used can be less. Why? Because as they say, the picture itself conveys 1,000 words. So you do not need to explain everything bit by bit. As compared to this, if you talk about the advertorials, something that I talked about in my last session. In advertorials, you will have to explain the context, you will have to explain the existing situation, you will have to explain the kind of challenges that this brand or the society is facing and how the two connect and everything. So you will have to develop it bit by bit in form of words, in form of text. As opposed to this, when sometimes you would also like to talk through cartoons, caricature, or for that matter even through I showed you this ad on Zuzu's. So ideally a few things through animations or through caricature get communicated on their own. The motion that is brought in and the way motion is brought in a little clip of a film or anything like that, a video, will automatically talk a lot of things. So you have to learn to customize the content that you're offering for each platform and target audience. So that's about knowing your means. Now we talk about tracking of results. When I say tracking of results, the measuring of effectiveness of results is important. Like I was just talking about midterm corrections and why you should introduce it. The similar are the concerns and similar are the reasons why you should be tracking your results. How else will you be able to figure out what is the next best thing to do in the future campaigns? So measuring the effectiveness of the launch of the launch of the PR campaign is very important. So following up of the work and tracking content can be helpful in measuring. When we say following up of the work, it is important to see how your the content has progressed. So every step of communication must be documented. And you should be able to see how every step of communication has been able to create a certain kind of effect and whether it has been able to create that effect at all or not. So following up of that work and tracking the content, what kind of content was given in say phase 1 as compared to the next phase, as compared to the final phase where probably you were expecting that people would purchase a product or vote for a certain leader, or a film would be a hit or a flop, anything of that sort. So what is that final phase that you were looking at? All of it together when you put up, you have to, this is called the tracking of content, and this is how you follow up the work. How is it important? Because in every phase you will be able to measure the results. So there were short time goals, there were short term objectives that were set for each phase, and whether the consistency in results have been there or not, whether the results have been obtained at all in the positive fashion or not is all important. Then this can be helpful in measuring, because when you're already following up the work and when you're already tracking the content, you will be able to figure out whether measurement has been possible, whether it has been helpful in measuring the entire public relations campaign in totality or not. And then of course, like I say, there is always a scope for midterm corrections, and when you're tracking results, you should see to it that the flexibility that was there in the plan should be allowing you to make some interventions, should be able to allow you to make some midterm corrections so that we can obtain better positive results at the end of the campaign. Then sometimes noticeable results may take time to show. This is something that brands at times fail to understand. Of course, with the way marketing is growing, people have started taking note of this, but it is difficult for people to understand that once they have invested a certain quantum of money in certain kind of activities, why is it that noticeable, measurable outcomes are not being seen? But ideally, there can be ways, there can be reasons, why noticeable results will take time to show. And one must be willing to wait for a few months until that thing comes out. Say for example, if you have made people in the surrounding areas aware about the new coronavirus, it will only be after the entire community starts becoming more aware of their habits, of the way they should sanitize their areas and everything, that this will start showing results. And the results will take time to come when you will see the numbers of patients coming down over a period of time. So ideally, the result may take time to show. You have to maintain that patience. That's very important. Now we come to the last bit of it, the last bit of this public relations campaign, which is also the most important, is evaluation and evaluation based decisions. So you will review the tracked results. You have done the result tracking so far. You have seen where we've gone wrong. You've seen what has, what we've produced. What is the data talking about? Now this is the time to look at the results again, holistically, in totality, and reviewing it. So you look at the long-term results in the light of the strategy that was used. There are 2-3 things. One are the short-term goals. At the end of 8 months, I would like to look at 1, 2, 3. Then at the end of 2 years, I would like to look at 1, 2, 3. Both of them are connected together by means of strategies of communication, which also combine with marketing, which also combine with the budget that you're setting annually as an investment towards this professional communication, which includes marketing, which includes advertising, which includes holding events, public relations, so on and so forth. So you are looking at long-term results, and you're looking at it in the light of the basic blueprint, the strategy that convinced you to go ahead with this. And that is why I say that there should always be, the scope for flexibility, for changing the plans, because goals at time might change. Say for example, during these special times of coronavirus, the goals would change. Why? Because marketing will have to be done differently. You cannot be expecting an aggressive market, and you cannot be expecting aggressive profits. So what do you do? How do you fight? How do you convince the customer that it is not just the product that he is bargaining for, it is also a health concern? So in such kind of a case, it is important that we change our strategy, and accordingly we look at the results. Then measuring of the result of the success of the campaign with analytics is very important in order to make a future plan. When I say analytics, analytics means analyzing the big data. Today there are so many technologies, there is so much work happening at the back end that everything is being tracked through data. So while you're on a social media platform, all your psychographics has already been tracked. People know, the marketers know what is it that interests you, what are your habits, what are your behaviors, what you would like and what you wouldn't. So ideally this measurement of success of this campaign with the help of analytics will help a brand in making a future plan. This is called evaluation based decision. Thank you very much for this session. Think creative, think PR. Thank you.